Good morning, good day, and good evening. I'm as always your host, Brody Robertson, and today we have someone on the show who you may know for many different things, whether it's work on GNOME, whether it's work on Portals, Wayland stuff, getting OBS working on Wayland, destroying the meme about the GNOME file picker, many things. Welcome to the show. How about you introduce yourself?
Oh, thanks for having me, Brody. My name is
Absolutely.
Georges. Yes, I think I do many things. And
I noticed you
we
pop
can talk
up.
about them.
Well, I don't know if we'll get to everything, but we'll definitely try to at least touch on most of them. Um, I've noticed you pop up like everywhere. Like I'll just be going through some like random things. Like, why are you like you? I've talked about you amongst a group of other people that are these people that are really dedicated to improving FOSS. You all have like these different focuses. Like Neil, for example, is very focused on doing the KDE stuff and like does a lot of work there, but he's also involved in Wayland and these other things. There's people like Dallas Strauss who do a lot of great work as well. And you know, whilst there are these passing contributors that'll make, a couple of commits here and there, the FOSS world wouldn't be able to function without people like you who are doing like a lot of work to really get things, pieced together and dealing with these problems.
Yeah, I don't know how I end up in all of these places. It just happens. Um, but really, people like me are, how can I put it? We are aberrations that shouldn't
Yep,
really
yep.
exist. Because I can tell you with a high degree of certainty that if you see somebody in too many places doing too many things, this person is probably on the verge of burning out or has already done that.
I hope
Um,
I hope that's just a theory and not saying that you are close to burning out. I hope that
oh
you.
no, I had my cycles already.
Okay,
I'm in a good spot right now.
well, that's
We're
good.
in a fantastic time of the year to
Mhm.
talk because I'm not drowning in despair.
Yep, yep. That's a great way to put it. So I guess the best place to start, I do this with a lot of people. How did you get started on Linux? We'll start with how did you get started on there? Did you have development experience before that, or did you get started developing when you started using Linux? Like, how did you really get started in this world?
This is a fun question. I think this is an entertaining story for the viewers of
Mhm.
this podcast, of the listeners of this podcast. 'Cause, my story with computers is long. Um, like I started using computers when I was a super small child, and back then, um, computers here in Brazil, the computing world was mostly offline.
Mm.
So you had to have CDs and those. I don't know how to say that in English. Those we called it diskettes.
Oh yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
like not sure if that's
Most of my
there's
audience are like mid 20s, so some of them may not know. I can bring up a
yeah
picture. Um,
right.
they sort of look like floppies. Well, they are a floppy disk.
Floppies,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's the word I was looking for.
For some reason, my
Uh,
brain thought a diskette and a floppy were a different thing. No, no, they're not. It's floppy.
are exactly the same thing. Um, Essentially, it's the
The
thing that
save icon.
our nails have more memory capacity than those things.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was mostly offline. And when I was a kid, we managed to get some like computer carcasses on the street. They were just thrown away, and we got
Mm-hmm.
and grabbed a bunch of like memory slots, memory processors that were broken, and we just I was just playing with them in three different carcasses of computers and trying to figure something out. Something that when I pressed the power button wouldn't smell like burnt chips. um, then eventually I found like a combination that had like 200 megabytes of memory, one super shitty processor, and whatever. And it needed an operating system.
Mm-hmm.
What I was going to put there, I didn't have any money. It was kid. I could not buy a Windows license. It did not have a CD reader
Mhm.
that I'm not even sure I can call that a machine, a computer. That thing didn't have a CD reader. So I went to a local place. I had like a local technician had a bunch of floppy disks with Slackware. I think it was 20
Oh,
floppy
okay.
disks. And I installed Linux for the first time. I was back in 2003, I think.
That's a
2002,
really late
3.
time to be using Slackware. Wow.
Yeah,
I guess it makes
I
sense.
had no idea. It
Yeah.
was a really rough experience, I can tell you. It was a time I don't think people hearing this will even be able to empathize, but it was a time where you had to recompile the kernel if you wanted to enable USB.
So what?
Yes. Dynamic kernel module loading is a thing of the recent times.
Mhm.
It's a modern kids technology. And then I started learning programming because I looked in the internet. It was a um, dial-up connection.
Mhm.
It was super fun. Every distro that I wanted to test took like a week to download. Super fun. When you're young and when you're a kid and you have lots of free time, this is super interesting to do. Like it's
Yep.
massive and expensive toy that I didn't have to pay because everything was on the street, literally on the sidewalk, and I grabbed it. And yeah, so I just looked how to write an exe program because that's what I thought programs were.
Oh, right.
And Yahoo Answers had the first answer was like, you have to learn the C programming language. So I started learning at a very early age. I was 9 at the time.
So
It's
you
a
did
C programming language.
so you did at least have knowledge of Windows at that point then. It's just you
Yeah.
didn't have a system yourself.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
It is about that long that I haven't used Windows in
Mhm.
my in any one of my devices. I just learned C, and then it is very natural when you're wanting to study and explore and do things and you're already using Linux, using like learning a programming language and contributing is just natural. Free
Mhm.
software is excellent for people studying these things. So number 2, rule of the GPL license, right? The right to study, something like that.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's how basically how I got into programming. And a few
Wow.
years later, I saw like a project in GNOME called GNOME Calendar. A super
Okay.
young project. I was contributing with translations to GNOME. I originally started contributing. Um, I wrote lots of GTK programs before, like
Mhm.
personally, on my local system. I never published anything. And I saw this little project called GNOME Calendar. I was like, this is nice. I like calendars. Then the project, the person, the author of the program, stopped publishing commits, and I was like, no, this project's not gonna die in front of me like this. So I started sending code as well, and that's how it all started.
Wow.
The beginning of the um, post-collapse apocalypse story starts here.
So the what a of all the things to get like started on, it was the calendar. If we look at the repo today, you are right at the top of the contributor list.
Yeah, it's still my little baby. I'm still working on it. After how long? I don't know, 10 years,
Mhm.
9 years.
Oh, and you
It's
pushed
been a long
something just
time.
an hour before you got here.
Ah, yeah. I just before this interview, when I don't know when it's reaching people, but
Mhm.
before we were recording this, I released GNOME Calendar 41. I started GNOME, 45.1,
Mhm, mhm.
and started the new release cycle,
Okay.
46.alpha.
Mhm.
I had to speedrun because I forgot it was this Saturday that I had to do that, and I forgot about it, and I was like, "Oh shit, I have to do this right now," and publish it.
So, why is it that Okay, so obviously you found your way to GNOME Calendar, but when was that? If you recall,
Um,
roughly.
Probably around 2013
Okay. So
or yeah,
obviously
something
there's
like that.
been like a lot of time between then, but why did you decide? So were you using GNOME at that point, and have you like actively used other environments, or has it been primarily living within this GNOME environment?
I think I used KDE back in the KDE 3 days. Um, and then like the thing that got me into GNOME, I got into GNOME like by the early 2.0 days. Um, it was even probably before Ubuntu was even released. Um, and then Ubuntu came in with a really different value proposition of making that super annoying and complicated Linux space a little less terrible. And they were using GNOME, so I just used it for a couple of releases and then moved to. I think I moved to Arch in like 2006 and then never left that. Um, but yeah, I basically used some things here and there, and then went to GNOME, and then started doing things and forgot about GNOME as a thing. So I just kept using it out of inertia, you know.
Right, that makes sense. Well, I guess it's kind
Then
of the same with
yeah,
Arch. You started using it like, why would I change? Like it's here.
it's funny, right? It's like I feel like the Linux space has this culture around distros that um like when I'm doing my own streams, when I'm coding something live and doing these things, every single time someone pops in and asks like, with distribution, what distribution are you
Yep,
using?
yep.
And my answer to that is always, the distribution does not matter. I use whatever gets me into GNOME
Mhm.
with the least amount of friction, and Arch has been consistently giving me GNOME without getting in my way, so that's why I use it. But if there's no attachment to any particular distributions, you know, just they serve a purpose, and that's the purpose that I have for myself.
The only argument I've spoken to a lot of developers about this, and a lot of them seem to fall towards things like Fedora and Arch, and it seems like the general reasoning is I don't really care about the distro, but I want to have up to date dependencies. So I'll just go
That's
with
one reason
something
too.
that
Yeah,
gives me that, because you could go Gentoo and like get all the up to date stuff compiled yourself, but like if Arch is going to give it to you without the compiling aspect, it gets you all the way there anyway.
yeah. Most of the time, people just want to go to their corners and do whatever they want
Mm-hmm.
in that particular space. So I don't want to compile my entire system. I just want to compile GNOME stuff and
Yeah.
test GNOME stuff, and then Arch comes in and they install. I don't have to install development packages because that's super annoying to me. I just have to. If it runs, I can build. That's how Arch packages things, and that's super convenient for me. So I just keep using it. But I wanted to have frame pointers. There was a controversy in the Fedora space I don't know, many months ago, a few months ago, how many weeks, I don't quite remember. But I wanted those frame pointers. I wanted the frame pointer juice for myself too. And Arch doesn't have that, so I'm reconsidering my choices.
What is a frame pointer? I've not heard this term before.
Um, Basically, when you're compiling software, you can pass I think by default it enables frame pointers, and most distributions disables frame pointers, which is like when you're compiling it, it stores pointers to the frame of memory that that particular function is executing. And
Okay.
so things like sysprof can poke into that information, and like system profilers like sysprof can poke into the frame pointers and figure out which function was executing. Um,
Okay, right, right.
so you can get like super detailed system profiling happening at any time for any program if you enable that for everything on your system. So you know, like, my GNOME desktop environment is stuttering. What the hell is going on here? And then you just fire up sysprof, press a button, and then you get like profile of each and every app,
Okay,
and
right.
including GNOME shell. What were they executing? Who was taking more CPU space than others? What the hell was going on there? How many frames are missed? And so you have these super interesting, detailed information that is incredibly helpful when you're trying to optimize things.
Mm-hmm.
But enabling it in packages has been a source of controversy. And as far as I understand, it's because it can lead to like 1 or 2% performance downgrade when you enable it, because you have to put an extra bit of information in every function, and that can be slow. And then I think part of the controversy was people saying like, but if we have this information, we're going to lose 1% here. You're going to lose 1% by enabling it, but we're going to improve 50% because we know what the hell is going on.
Yeah.
And then that was this controversy on Fedora, I think. And I wanted those frames pointers for myself too. If you go, there's a person in the GNOME space called Christian Hargert.
Yep. Okay.
He did a lot of performance work over the last cycle, and specifically because he was able to do that because of frame pointers. Now, when you type a character in GNOME shell search, it shows results a lot faster and reduce CPU usage by like a bazillion %, and that's because we could figure out these things out of this information. So who knows?
There is this weird mindset in the Linux world amongst certain people where and I'm sure you've seen this, especially with the Flatpak stuff, any sort of extra overhead is just instantly bad. It's like, you'll have these different runtimes, and while there is deduplication, you're still going to have, like, it's naturally going to be bigger because there's going to be things in the runtimes you're just simply not using. And any extra megabyte, it doesn't matter how much storage space you have, any extra megabyte, giant issue. Can't have that. And it's the same with that, like, 1%. Even though it's going to be this really great debugging tool, there's going to be these people who are like, no, I want that extra 1%. Am I going to notice it? No, but I want it.
I don't know how much I can tell about that, because that's super annoying. And that's basically I think there's an English term for that, self-owning,
like self-centered,
self-destructive, a self whatever.
Sure.
Like you self-own yourself. You do something. You advocate for something that is fundamentally going to work against you.
Yep.
So it happens the same when it comes to Flatpak. It happens the same when it comes to containers in general. But it's, I don't know, as a developer, you get some nuance from these things, and I had a lot of trouble with dependencies in GNOME Calendar, which is not even a complicated application. It has a few dependencies, but it's not even a difficult one. And I've got those problems myself. So imagine a super sensitive application like, I don't know, Bottles, that has to run wine, and wine is like belladonna. If you change one folder, it's going to break everything. So Bottles has to keep very strict understand, like whatever it ships, it has to be exactly that.
Yeah.
Because it's exactly what they tested. So we got a little bit more nuance. It's easier to fix bugs. It's easier to understand what's going on. And there are people that are going to go nuts. And I think that's probably just part of the nature of the Linux community. Like I have this expression that I say that people are too literate to be ignorant, and too illiterate to be useful. They know too much to be able to contribute productively to a certain project, but not. Sorry. they know too much to think that they know, but not enough to actually do. And we get that a lot in
Right.
Linux
There's
spaces.
a there's a
I'm
there's
sure
a
there's a fancy
yeah, there is.
English phrasal verb for that with birds, with whatever.
Um, it someone's gonna mention in the comments. There's this concept where the less you know about something, the more you think you know. But as you learn more about it, you realize how much more there is to learn, and you realize I actually don't.
Dunning-Kruger effect.
I'm sure you got the interims back there. Like you first pick up any of them, you're like, yeah, this is I got this. This makes sense. A couple of months later, you're like, wait, I have no idea what I'm doing. This is actually way more complicated than I thought.
So if you ask me, this is going to be a fun exercise because if you ask me basically any question about anything, I'm going to probably prefix my answers with, I have no idea what I'm talking about. This is super complicated. And I know that for a fact that because people have specifically told me that like they look forward to my opinions on particular subjects because they think that I know what I'm doing and I know enough to know that I have no fucking idea what I'm doing, what the hell things are about. So
You just stumble through it, and it just happens to work itself out.
many things we can talk about the cultural aspects of the Linux community and free software communities and whatever understandings and misunderstandings they have over what free software is and what people should do. It's a never-ending source of entertainment for everyone. But now you have to like distance yourself from if you want to look into this and like, how can I say this? Like I'm working on these things.
Mm-hmm.
So if I want to interact with people, I have to distance myself from those from the people that are talking and using. Otherwise, it's gonna be like attacks from
Right.
every like every every everywhere I look. There's somebody like with a very strong opinion trying to attack, and that's all over the place. It requires a certain level of detachment to to whatever you're doing.
It's really easy to forget that most people that use Linux don't get involved in these discussions. There is a big silent majority who are just using GNOME, they're using KDE, they're using whatever distro they're using, and they don't have an opinion on it. They're just like, okay, this works. But those people, those aren't the ones that are getting. They're not ones who are like coming into repos being like, this is a terrible idea. Why are you doing this? Why don't you do it my way? I'm not going to submit a merge request about it. Just do it my way. When is this going to be done? But, or like, GNOME's bad, KDE's bad, like all of this sort of stuff. Most people are just like the Linux world as it stands today is in a great state. It's not like every single person has to be a developer, and this is a good thing. It's people can be they can miss the early days when you were saying before you had to recompile the kernel to get USB work. Like people can want for those days again, but the fact that all of these people can use Linux and just not have to worry about stuff and can just go about their day really says a lot about just how much great work has been done over these years.
I feel like this is a kind of subject that has a lot to explore. It is, as I said, it's a never-ending source of entertainment. Like one thing that I've been pondering about, and I have started noticing, is how the question of association and identity, this might be too meta level, but the question of association is fluid in the eyes of the internet community. Like, right now we're talking as if I'm representing GNOME or representing is a strong word, but people might look into this interview, this conversation, and tag me as GNOME.
Mm-hmm.
But in other occasions, people are very willingly to not tag me as GNOME when it's well, I see that because I am involved in GNOME development for a long time, and it's like I'm gonna give you an example that you will at least understand. I merged the accent colors merge request for the XDG desktop portal settings interface.
Mm-hmm.
It was just like a documentation comment, but we had to discuss what was going to be the setting in these things. But nobody said like GNOME merged accent colors in XDG desktop portals, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
People were saying like GNOME was giving trouble to merging those things.
Right.
And I don't even think that this is done by like some sort of bad faith or anything. It's just something natural that occurs when people think of identities and whatnot. Like to many people, GNOME is bad, and whatever GNOME do by definition is bad. So if something good happens, it's natural that whoever did that must not be GNOME.
Right.
Otherwise, how can I keep thinking that GNOME's bad if the thing that I wanted in that portal was merged by a GNOME person? How can I say that GNOME didn't merge this or was giving trouble? You know, the GNOME merged and GNOME didn't merge. That doesn't make sense. It happens very often in many different discussions, and it's not something that people. I don't even think people perceive themselves as doing this. It's just naturally happening everywhere. I don't know if you have opinions about that,
No,
but I keep seeing this happening over and over and over, and it's especially common when like in a free software community like GNOME, where there's a lot of people and most of them wear many hats. So I'm GNOME, I'm Flatpak, I'm wearing the Portals hat, I'm wearing the Flatpak, I'm wearing the Wayland hat, I'm wearing the OBS hat. I have many hats, and which hat I'm using, which label I'm attached to, which association I have is fluid to preserve a certain narrative that people may have in their fantasies, you know. Maybe I'm going too meta on this, but it's just something I keep noticing over and over, and it's really fun once you
it's definitely
stop
fun.
feeling bad about it.
I'd never really thought about it like that. I think when we're talking about, okay, so let me see how I can phrase this. When we're talking about a person involved in a project that is clearly tied to that project, I can understand being like, say for Bottles, for example, when Mirko Bromben does something, this is clearly the Bottles guy. Like, if you think of Bottles, you are thinking of Mirko. If you think of Hyperlend, you think of Vaxu. If you think, like, there are these projects out there where there is a person that directly represents the project. It's a far smaller project than what is GNOME. But even in the GNOME case, like, anytime Tobias does anything, for example, like, that is going to be perceived as this is GNOME doing it, or you know, you can pick any of like the big names, or like Nate Graham for KDE, or anyone like this, where sort of a lot of their sort of persona in these repos seems to be tied to that project. But even then that it gets weird when it's outside of the project. Like, when it's something inside GNOME and Tobias is saying something, you can sort of perceive this as this is GNOME doing. But even then, there are these different voices in the project. Even though, at least from my perspective, it seems like GNOME is a lot more, maybe you'll disagree with this, but seems a lot more consistent in like the vision they have for the desktop. as opposed to something like, if you look at the Wayland Protocols repo, for example, where everybody has all of these different ideas, but yeah, I think what's important, and this is what I try to do when I talk about changes being done, whilst I will mention where someone sort of often comes from, like, oh, if someone, works at Red Hat, for example, I will mention that they are from Red Hat. If someone is, at least seems in this perspective, or in this occasion, to be representing a project, I will mention it. But I think it's important to focus on the individual developers, because even within a project like GNOME, these individual developers are going to have their different ideas on how they can approach these different problems.
Yeah, you see, it's I can infer and say that the same probably happens for KDE.
Sure.
In fact, there are KDE folks, fantastic KDE folks who linger in GNOME spaces, and we talk every time. It's not completely alien that the communities are somewhat they share a lot of values and things. But maybe because I am involved in the day-to-day conversations, that there's this concept of rough consensus, and it is what reigns in most of these communities, because there is a lot more diversity in voices than people can expect when they are only looking at things from the outside. And that happens in GNOME a lot. Many different people with sometimes antagonistic views on many subjects. But even then, at the end of the day, people will look into and perceive it as a community. The Barshi, there was a GNOME contributor called the Barshi Ray, wrote a fantastic essay on the mythological GNOME mounting, where people think and are their username is Rishi. I don't quite remember when they wrote about it. It was probably like 5 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Imagine a GNOME mountain with a castle, an evil-esque castle, those ghosts walking around and people thinking in like they're acephalate cells of a unified organism called GNOME. That's basically what people perceive, but when you enter in there, it's completely different. People are just arguing about everything all the time. Probably more than outside of GNOME in some sense. And I can tell that's probably the case for KDE as well, and other communities. I'm mentioning KDE because it's a fairly big community, and big communities have lots of disagreements that we don't know about. All the time. All the damn time. It is sometimes even annoying.
I think, well, at least with GNOME, and I'm sure it's the same for KDE, there is at least these basic guiding principles that you all agree upon. Like, you agree that we are going to be using whatever the current version of GTK is. You agree that we're going to be writing in, I presume, is the main language of GNOME C++? What is the main language?
I think for libraries it's still C.
Okay.
And for apps, there's a diversity of languages. People are writing a lot of Rust code, Python, Vala.
Oh, right. I forgot about that one. But like, there are these basic things that everybody agrees upon. Like, no one's gonna argue that GNOME should start using Qt as like their main like library. And it's like the same for KDE. Like, everyone agrees, like, we're doing the Qt thing, all of that. But where you start seeing these like disagreements become really, I guess, apparent is when you look into these sort of cross-desktop solutions where there's all of these different maybe not competing, but sort of, I guess, incompatible in a sense goals for what they want to see done. Like Wayland Protocol is my favorite example because this is
Ah,
a mixing of so many different ideas that whilst you all agree that we want to make the Wayland desktop better, GNOME's going to have their approach. KDE is going to have their approach. Cosmic is doing their thing. Budgie is eventually going to catch up to Wayland. XSCE will hopefully one day catch up as well. But it, I'm sure there is. I'm sure there is more agreement than there is disagreement. Like, it's not like every single issue is going to turn into the tearing protocol or
yeah.
dealing with like color management and things like that. I'm sure for a lot of things, it's like, okay, this is a good idea, merge it. But when there are these situations where goals completely diverge, that's where you start seeing sort of how, I guess, how weak this idea of like, people talk about the Linux community, but really it's these individual sub-communities that all happen to be using these similar sort of technologies.
Yeah. Well, Wayland is a particular source of
I'm sure.
steam, right? It is a difficult project.
Mm-hmm.
Portals is not it's not much far behind, because it intersects code and APIs
Mm-hmm.
and application use cases and political visions of the desktop.
Mm-hmm.
It intersects in all of these areas, and that's really hard to get consensus on.
Mm-hmm.
Incredibly hard to get some consensus on, and specifically in the Wayland case, where it is proposing a different approach to how things are organized in the desktop. It's not simply like you call the X11 function, you now call Wayland function.
Mm-hmm.
You just replace the prefix of the functions and you get it's completely separate thing. It approaches the problem from another angle, and people have been writing code for Xarc for twice as long as Linux exists.
Yeah.
So you get a problem of people really not getting what's happening in there.
Things are.
But it's on the other.
Go on.
Oh,
Go on.
sorry. On the other hand, I feel like things like Wayland are PipeWire portals. They are. If you look at it with kinder eyes, you're gonna see lots of innovation happening there. Not in the sense of the code being written,
mm-hmm.
but the approaches to different things. Like Wayland is my favorite. PipeWire, I don't think people realized how much of an earth-shattering, groundbreaking innovation that PipeWire is, because we're still not exploring the full potential of this technology.
I think
Windows and macOS, they did not have a multimedia center
mm-hmm.
within, not a multimedia center in the sense of a multimedia provider, but something that connects everything that can generate and consume multimedia in their desktops. Windows and Mac, they don't have anything like that.
I think the reason most people don't realize is because it's been a very seamless transition. Right now, with what we're exploring, it's, hey, it's a Pulse audio server. Everything just works. Like, there were issues early on. PipeWire has had some bugs that needed to be ironed out. Like, I had this issue where my master audio didn't exist. So when I was capturing things in OBS, it was using the level of my speaker as what it was capturing in OBS, which was not supposed to happen.
Uh-oh.
Luckily, that got dealt with a long time ago, but that during that period, I had to swap back to Pulse Audio because like this is not gonna work. But PipeWire has been this very, very smooth transition. So even though it does, like, obviously the video stuff is the most notable part with OBS on Wayland. For most people, they don't need to care about it. It's like their distro swaps out Pulse Audio to PipeWire and is fine. If your distro decides that, X11 is no longer going to be the default, it's going to be Wayland. Like, there is going to be a lot more things that you notice there, especially if you were Fedora, 5+ years ago when they did it.
Mm-hmm. I'm not going to comment much on the Pulse Audio / PipeWire transition because it was almost a non-event. Most of people, almost everybody was smooth, and that's. I've seen people on the internet saying that Wayland should have done X or Y or Z like PipeWire.
Wayland,
so that
we shouldn't have done transition. Wayland. It should have been X12. Is my favorite one.
Like, sure, if the X protocol was all right, we wouldn't have the problem. Pulse Audio, the protocol was not fundamentally broken. It was just an approach. PipeWire could implement that very easily and carry on with life. Wayland is not like that at all. But what I was saying is more like, sure, there may be bugs may be fixed. It's just the nature of the whole thing. But imagine, I'm just gonna let's do a mental exercise here, buddy. Imagine you're in a professional streaming setting. Mm-hmm. You are streaming, I don't know, an event, a gaming event. You have many players, many groups, like teams. They are playing their games and they are streaming their games to like a local computer that captures their things and composes it into like a nice video stream that you see on Twitch, and then encodes it and sends to it. So now imagine you have instead multiple OBS instances. One of those instances is capturing player one's game, and the second one is capturing it player two's game and putting something on top of it. And then you send those two things to two different OBS outputs into a third OBS that composes those two scenes, two players that are already composed with some fancy effects. You compose it into something else and encode it, and then send into another OBS. The glue that is going to do that is going to be PipeWire. We're going to be able to do a lot more like cross-app multimedia sharing. Imagine, I don't know, you're a VTuber, you got a T2D. You want to send that output to OBS Studio. And the way people do that now is having to load a kernel module called Linux Video for Linux, loopback, whatever.
Yep.
So that they can send frames to another application.
I love that module. It's great.
Yes, I can see from your face that you have you're passionate about it.
The only reason I have it installed is camera loopbacks. Yeah. That's the because there's no way to do virtual cameras. So, well, at least there was no way.
There will be. I can tell you that a little peek into the future. I have some patches. Well, I basically squashed lots of patches from Wim and other contributors that introduce webcams in OBS through PipeWire. There are people working on that for Firefox and Chrome. And there's another member of the OBS community who's working on a portal that allows a peer-to-peer app media sharing.
Okay.
That you can, Inochi can send VTuber frames to OBS Studio, without a kernel module being involved. And then OBS can also capture the camera if you want, because when you have PipeWire, you can have multiple apps reading cameras at
Imagine
the same
that.
time.
What a crazy,
Imagine.
what a crazy idea that is.
And then OBS can compose something and export to PipeWire as a virtual camera without involving any kernel modules as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then Firefox can also read from your VTuber avatar rendered on OBS with sparkling effects into Zoom or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That's essentially where everything is converging now.
Now, the obvious question here is, does this come with some performance overhead that the kernel approach didn't have? Is it any more performant, any less performant from what's been worked on at this point?
I can't really say before having these things actually running.
Mm-hmm.
I would expect to be more performant because, for example, I think video for Linux doesn't requires you to export opaque cameras. So Inochi, I think, has to export your VTuber avatar with the green screen behind it,
Mm-hmm.
and then OBS has to remove the green screen so that it has your avatar with a transparent background. You can put on top of it whatever content you have.
Mm-hmm.
And with PipeWire, you don't have to do that.
Ah.
In fact, you don't even have to. In fact, you don't even have to copy the frames because PipeWire allows DMA buff sharing. So Inochi just renders the thing and tells OBS, hey, this is the GPU address of my memory. Read from it. And then OBS can render that using OpenGL. So instead of downloading the frame contents into OBS memory and then uploading again to GPU memory again, it just tells the GPU, hey, copy those frames here, those pixels in here, and then it gets much faster.
That's really
Lots of
exciting.
possibilities. Yeah, it is really exciting. I don't think we grasped how profound this change is going to impact.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell you, this is an innovation of the Linux desktop. I don't think Windows and Mac have anything that's close to that. Nothing on their user space. Should take advantage of that instead of just thinking like, oh, just gonna make OBS do the same but using another technology so that it does thing with this cool technology. No, what can you do differently and better? And then use that as a selling point of the platform.
Because that's whilst most people have swapped over, there are still some holdouts on Pulse Audio. It's like, why? Like, what does it do differently? Like, it just does what Pulse is doing. I don't use Jack. I don't need it to like all be managed in the same thing. But things like that, that can really change the way we handle video. Because I have always thought it was weird that when I open up something like what's it called? Why am I blanking on the name? The patch bay that I use that I'm forgetting the name of.
Carla?
Sorry?
Carla? Helvium? Which one is it?
It's not Helvin, there's another one that I use. I'm completely forgetting the name of. Doesn't matter. I've always thought it was a little odd that there's this one video thing just sitting there. Nothing's using it. Because it's just there. Like, it has the video functionality, but my webcams, they're just doing their own thing and they're not being passed through. That, you know what? I just realized that. Okay, that's actually really, yeah, okay. I already
can
thought
see
it was,
the tsunami of information getting to you now.
I already thought it was cool, but just piecing together the fact that there will come a point where you can just hook up your camera into different things through a patch bay, like,
Yeah.
that's cool. That's really cool.
Yes. PipeWire, at the end of the day, PipeWire is just a multimedia. It just exposed nodes of things that it can handle, be it audio, MIDI, camera, whatever. There's a list of formats that it can handle. And you can connect things together if they tell PipeWire, hey, I can handle this. I have this slot, give me whatever, audio or something like that. So you can go nuts on the ideas. You can think of as many crazy things you want, it's probably going to be possible with PipeWire. And on top of that, it has a media session mechanism that allows people to implement policies on top of PipeWire. Is like, I just have nodes in this graph. I don't do anything with them. I don't connect it to anything else. And then comes a media session that tells, hey, connect your microphone to, I don't know, Chromium, so that you can use WebRTC to speak. And then you can have a permission system on top of that. So you can say, like, I disallow, using portals, for example, you can say, I disallow this application to use my microphone. I do not allow this application to use my cameras.
And I did see
I
that
only allow this application to use this specific camera, and period.
Mm-hmm.
And then we reach the future of the Linux desktop.
I did see you have that audio portal that's being worked on.
Yeah, it's still under discussion. We want to see how things go.
It was started 2 weeks ago. If it was done in 2 weeks, that would be a very quick turnover for anything in portals.
It's gonna be complicated because not only you have to provide a desktop portal API for that, but apps have to start using them and removing the Flatpak permission to talk to Pulse Audio directly. The goal is to remove all static permissions and everything is dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
And you can control it. And this is one of those static permissions that we want to get rid of. So the idea is basically the same. You request access to, I don't know, I think the proposed API allows you to request access to speakers, microphones, and audio monitoring. Mm-hmm. Either combination of these three. You can just your application can just request like speakers, and we don't even have to pop up a permission dialog in front of you because it's harmless. Mm-hmm. But if it wants to use your microphone, it's a little bit more privacy sensitive, so it's probably a better idea to ask you if you want to allow it or not. Mm-hmm. But these policies are also defined by the backend. So if, I don't know, I'm just guessing, but if KDE says like, nah, this is too bothersome, just allow everything, and then people can remove the permission if they want to later on, they can do that as well. Pretty nice, but we have to convince people that it's worth using it. So once you have permission, you connect to PipeWire, and then PipeWire is going to magically tell you, here are the audio devices, here are the video devices, here are the whatever devices you requested. Things like that.
Well, that sort of ties into what I did want to get to at some point. Why should somebody care about this whole idea of bringing a permission system onto the Linux desktop? Because this is something that's well established in Android, for example. Like, if an app wants to pretty much get anything, it will need to ask you about, like, it wants to get access to your camera, it needs to ask you. It wants web access, it will need to ask you. Your contacts needs to ask you. A lot of, like, Linux has never had this. Like, this is just not a thing that we've done. Why should somebody care?
I can start this. I can prefix this with that XKCD. I don't remember the number, but that one that says if somebody gets access to your computer, they can read your emails. Your Linux computer, they can read your emails. They can read your personal files and whatever, all of your information, but they cannot access root. Mm-hmm. Oh, like that's the world shuffled from one server with many clients, and each one of them having their own thing going on, to you using your computer, usually with a single user on your computer. And instead of trusting each other, you don't trust the things that you're running on your computer. Mm-hmm. It can be a malicious website, it can be a malicious application, it can have a pretty front-facing interface put in on the back end is mining crypto using your GPU, and you don't notice. So we shuffled from a world where you had to be cautious about other users of your computer accessing your information. Not that that's not important to this day, it is, still is. But also within the same user, you have this level of uncertainty about what you're running. And that's particularly bad for proprietary apps where you cannot access the code, you cannot like validate if what you're running going to steal something from you. So a permission system is necessary.
Mhm.
In this scenario where you cannot fully trust all applications that you're running, you have to have a mechanism that allows you to block it from accessing your stuff.
Mhm.
Like I don't know, whatever you install Skype 2 and Skype 2 keeps using your microphone to figure out what you're talking and train an AI model to, I don't know, whatever. It keeps accessing your microphone without you noticing.
Well, like a simple example in X11 is literally any application can just be a keylogger if it wants to.
Yeah, I had to write a keylogger for X11 to figure out to find the root cause of an OBS bug with browser docs. It's not only allowed and possible, it is sometimes required, even if you don't want to write a keylogger, even if you don't want to be an evil person, you're gonna be forced to be one. So it is important, and we are lagging behind already. Especially when you consider the mobile space.
Mm-hmm.
They have permissions and stricter. I think Android has one. Each app is its own Unix user, even so it uses a combination of permissions and Unix permissions both at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
We want to have that on the desktop, and I think it is not just something cool like, ooh, this app asks for my permission. Most of the time it's just an annoyance, you don't want to see dialogues. You install an app and you just want to use it.
Yeah.
But and I'm not trying to paint myself into the privacy, the hyper enthusiastic, paranoid privacy lover.
We're recording this on
But it isn't.
Discord.
But it is a necessity these days.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we don't have, on the Linux desktop, we don't have corporate control over it.
Mm-hmm.
So much so that we can implement these things. We can implement these things without any particular company coming to us and say, no, you really don't want this permission system because we want to do everything we want with your desktop.
Mm-hmm.
And I see it like, maybe this is too far ahead, but I see that in the future, Linux is going to be one bastion of desktop computing, not in the sense of the masses using it, but in the sense of people using it because it's the only viable option, not because it's the best option necessarily. Every Windows release, people like, it is kind of a news cliche at this point, but every Windows release, people start saying things like Windows is gonna make itself into a subscription OS or something like that.
I keep hearing software as a service every couple of months. Windows 12 we software as a service, and I wouldn't be surprised at this point. Like it
wouldn't surprise us, right?
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be. It wouldn't be.
Who cares what macOS is doing? They're their own ecosystem.
They're controlled, but I feel like most of these companies have these mechanisms. Like Google has a mechanism, a permissions mechanism on Android because of liability.
Mm-hmm.
Because if Google allowed everything in their app store and people start losing money out of that, they would get tons of lawsuits.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more like a protection for Google instead of a protection for you, a person using their devices, in the Android case, for example. But I can think the same for Apple. When it comes to Linux, when it comes to the Linux desktop, who's going to be sued? it's a community endeavor. It is a massive number of sub-communities working like as a big entity towards something else. But now we're facing I feel like we're facing a point in time where we have to protect ourselves from things that are not coming from the community. And that's where the whole sandboxing and not being able to access your files and your devices and whatever come into place. I was working on the USB portal.
Mhm.
I've been working
I was
I've been working
unaware
on
that
this
one
portal this
existed.
month. It doesn't exist yet. I'm doing it.
Oh, okay. Well, is there an open issue about it right now, or is it just like something?
I think there's a 3-year-old merge request. I published a branch in my fork of XDG Desktop Portal. It's not ready yet, but one point that people kept saying is that
5-year-old.
if
5-year-old
Yes.
issue about it.
yeah, the issue is 5-year-old. There is a draft merge request that is, I think, 3-year-old,
Oh, okay, right. Okay, that makes sense.
and I'm basically redoing that. At this point, is almost from scratch.
Mhm.
But Rafi64 did a fantastic work, like cracking this initial implementation. One of the things that people kept saying is that if an app has access, it doesn't even have to read your devices, but if it's able to detect that you have a certain, I don't know, YubiKey plugged in your computer, they can fingerprint you. And they will probably do. Like a malicious app can know who you are by what devices you have connected on your computer. So we have to be really careful with those things, and that's the one of the major selling points for Portals. The other, I think, is just providing a desktop API. Everything was in X11 days. Everyone could do anything at any time. Every app could participate in the compositing process of another app. So one app can render stuff on another app's interface.
Yeah.
One app can tell the other app where they should be. There's literally no boundaries. There's no hard lines.
This lets you
One
do
of the
fun
major
things.
differences.
maybe not safe things, but let you do fun things.
Yeah. It is one of the major architectural differences from Wayland, because on X11 they gave everyone the prescriptions. I think Daniel Stone used the term prescriptions. Apps tell X11 through the X11 protocol. They tell, put this thing here, or do this in this place. And on Wayland, you invert the order of things. Apps don't do things; they provide things. It's a big difference. It's like, instead of apps telling, put my window in this corner of the monitor, this is a prescription command. Like, it's telling the compositor what to do. And the Wayland model is, I think Daniel Stone uses the word descriptive. So the Wayland model is like, the application doesn't tell the compositor what to do. It just gives the compositor information. Like, I have a window. This window has this title. This window has this size. Here's a buffer for this window. I want this buffer to have this size. The color space of this buffer is this. And then the compositor takes a lot of this information and makes decision about it. The compositor says, okay, this app has this title. I'm going to put this title into a label beneath it, or things like that. But the app never tells the compositor where to draw the title label or anything like that. It's just a blob of information, and the compositor makes sense of it. Maybe I'm going through a very deep tangent here.
I think this entire episode.
I find beauty in this thing. This is
great. I love this.
It's like, I think people were discussing about the positioning, a way to position windows.
Yes, this is a recent thing that came up.
Recent merge request. And it is, when people look into it and say, no, this is somewhat like not matching the Wayland model is one of the reasons is this. It is prescriptive. It's telling the compositor what to do instead of providing information to the compositor and letting the compositor figure out. It could be worked around, for example, if you say like, this window has this identifier, and the compositor saves the last position of that window with that identifier. And then when you open the app again, the app's gonna tell like, hey, this window is that one with that identifier that I sent you before. And the compositor will be able to restore the previous location or something like that. I'm just guessing here. I'm not sure if this is actually a fantastic idea, but this is a more Waylandy of an idea
That is a
to approach this problem, you know.
There is the
There's a session restore.
Session restore. Yes, that is a separate thing that is being worked on as well. But this would be more about that sort of that first time over. Like you open GIMP in its multi-window mode, and if you open that on X11, you open that on Windows. Like GIMP is gonna be able to assign where it wants those windows to be, but as it stands on Wayland, that's very much up to the individual compositors. Some compositors might try to sensibly lay them out. Others might say, dump them all on top of each other. It's very much, to the user, it seems like something is buggy here.
Yeah, I'm not gonna deny that this isn't a problem. Like, this is a problem. I think my point is that it is better for the ecosystem for us to embrace the different model and try to come up with different approaches to fix the problem instead of just replicating the old approach into this new model which doesn't fit, you know. And that's, I think, when Jonas mentioned in one of the comments that it forbids innovation because you're essentially applying this. I think that's what I have in mind too. Like, this is a completely different way to do things. You have to approach things from a different angle to get the same behavior that you had before, you know. So just dumping the old thing into the new thing, it's one of the cheap way to get into a working state again, you know.
Yeah.
And we may miss some of the things, some of the fantastic possibilities that may pop up along the way.
No, I do agree with that. I think it's good to have this on the back burner, like as an idea. Like if we realize all of these new ideas are actually terrible and there's actually not a better way to do this, then hey, maybe it does make sense to replicate the old behavior. But whilst I do want this problem fixed, I don't want this problem fixed in a way that is going to limit what is possible in the future.
Yeah, we don't want to paint ourselves into a corner where we're forced to not be able to add cool new stuff because we're bound to old crafty stuff, right?
Yeah.
The new XR, VR/XR portal under discussion, we're facing the same problem. Like, how do we mangle all of these different moving parts together? And it's complicated, and people are used to working one way. Not in particular for the VR thing, because there's a very helpful person who laid out a panorama view of the whole situation. It's going to be easier to make decisions based on that. But it's difficult, right? And people have a tendency to get frustrated and irritated when things don't work. So there's always this pressure to get things working as fast as possible, whatever it takes, even if advocating for that may work against you in the future, you know. People just frustrated, and I can understand the frustration. I was frustrated too. I contribute to things that I'm frustrated about because I want to fix them. um, so I can't blame, but I can't, whatever.
I think you've probably heard this as well. You probably tune it out at this point, but there is a lot of people that will say things like, Wayland is, what, 15 years at this point? 2008, I think? 15 years old.
Almost, yeah.
Yeah, I want to say 2008. Wayland is 15 years old, and it's still not done. Like, it's not that well, firstly, a lot of the major issues have only been dealt with in the past, like, 3 or 4 years. As bad as, COVID and all that was, the one thing that it was good for is a lot of problems in the FOSS world got fixed when a lot of people didn't end up having to go to their day job. Turns out when people have a lot more free time, they have a lot more free time to work on things. So a lot of problems have been dealt with. But it's not that it's just 15 years old. It's that we have 35 years of X11 to and applications built for X11 around the X11 model that also need to be adjusted to fit into what we're doing now. It's not just, let's do a new thing, suddenly everything is just going to work. There's going to be a long and painful transitionary period, and right now, whilst a lot of problems are being dealt with, we are in the middle of that transitionary period.
I'd say we are closer to the end now. When people start talking about positioning the windows instead of corrupted buffers.
Sure.
We're pretty good.
Yeah, I often say that obviously, because different compositors will implement things at a different rate, it's not a consistent thing, but what I'll often say is Wayland, as it currently stands, is great if you're a normal user. If you go down the center path, everything is fine, but off to the sides, there are these giant gaping holes that you may find yourself falling into, like the window positioning, like OBS was just a couple of years ago. But for most users at this stage right now, everything you need is there. Accessibility is a big one that, like, really needs a lot more focus. And that I think is going to be a blocker for a while, because there are some people who simply cannot use their computer without some of the accessibility features that have been built up over the years on X11. And things like that can't just be left behind without some form of compatible equivalent replacement, or at least equivalent replacement. Whether it's compatible or not with the old solutions is another story. But
have good news for you, Brody.
Oh, what's being worked on?
Accessibility may be fixed.
Oh, what? What do we got? Anything you can say?
I cannot say the grandeur announcement, but there's people working on this problem domain.
I'm well aware there are people working on it. I just wasn't sure how far along it was.
I mean, there's people working specifically on figuring out this blocker of Wayland adoption. So
yeah.
So we may see some progress in a very near future. Just like I myself am working on the USB portal now. There's people working on new notifications. There's people working on a plethora of things around portals, and accessibility is one of them. And I really hope it is fixed for good now. Accessibility was one of the areas that got stuck in the essentially whatever Sun did when they implemented accessibility throughout the stack. And desktop graphics has very few people working on it. Desktop environments have very few people working on it. But it's an order of magnitude more people than accessibility. Companies have the tendency to see accessibility as a checklist. As long as you can keep the checks checked, everything's fine. More like government contracts and things like that that require accessible desktops.
Mhm.
So for most companies, it's just easier to switch the desktop session to X11 and have all the checks back again,
Mhm.
you know. But yeah, hopefully that's gonna be fixed for good, like with better protocols, better implementations, sandboxable approaches to the whole thing. Um, I really hope it's finished because it's just so annoying to.
No, I.
It's the kind of thing that a lot of people complain,
Mhm.
but there's just so few people with the necessary knowledge to
Yeah.
lead
Yeah.
something like this, and it just gets worse because the more people complain, the harder it is to look into the problem because it's so um, involved into toxicity that you don't want to touch that from a tin.
Mhm.
You don't want to touch that. It's difficult. It's difficult.
Well, I we sort of kind of briefly said words. Let me try that again. We touched on this briefly earlier. I only know English. I have no excuse for forgetting words. Um, so we sort of touched on this earlier, where people are sort of very, I guess, aggressive towards the GNOME developers, GNOME community. How do you find yourself dealing with this? Because you're not one of the, at least from what I've seen, the general target of that harassment. Like, you're not like Tobias. I'm sure gets way worse than what you get. Tobias is just the example because he was involved in the stop theme of my apps as well, which
Mm.
obviously made him a big target. But how do you find yourself dealing with this?
It's complicated, isn't it? Um, I have moments where I deal with these things well, and I had moments where I just bursted out and screwed everything up. Um, it is difficult. It is. I feel like it's one of those situations where sometimes it's not even. How can I put it? How can I how can I express this? I had to explicitly remove myself from social media and comment sections and not participate in these things in these places. And to some degree shut down communications as well to only a very strict subset of places. Because the attacks come from everywhere. I can tell you I have so many stories of abuse. It's not even fun. The Linux community treats its maintainers and its developers really badly. Even the better ones, the people who just shut up and do the work. People can be nasty online. Got everything. Got a full list. I got job harassment. I got doxing. Everything you can imagine. My Doga was death sentenced by email a few years ago. Threatening my Doga. It is complicated,
Mhm.
and I don't really know how much what else to say because putting ourselves online exposes you to other people, and that can change people's mind because when you see a face in a voice in a tone attached to a particular avatar, you humanize that person
Yep.
better, and then you can hear that person's voice in your inner fantasies. When you're reading a comment, you can attach a real human voice instead of just fantasizing whatever tone you're projecting into that person. um but generally, what worked for me was to withdraw myself from most of these places. And I'd say that our community does really bad in terms of treating people.
Oh, the audio died for a second.
Did it?
Oh, we're back.
Oh,
Just repeat what you said the last 5 seconds.
so I was just saying that I think the people in the Linux space are pretty bad at treating those who provide them the code and the desktop that they use some incentives.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I know that there's a negativity bias in the human brain, and that you have the tendency to remember bad experiences much more intensely than the good ones.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it happened enough times for me to have to like take these decisions to not have a Mastodon account, a Twitter account, or whatever new social media they have. I've never had Facebook or anything like that, so I basically just am online on very specific rooms in Matrix.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, it's kind of nasty. I don't really know how to fix this though. Um, I really I have thought about this subject for a long time, a really long time. You will find I think in 2018 I wrote an article about what it feels like to be a free software maintainer. Um, so this is not a problem that has made itself better over the past, how much, 5 years or so. um, like my expectation is that people. Let me take a step back. We have a big problem in our hands, Brody, because the Linux desktop is not cool.
Mm-hmm.
Companies are not throwing tons of money on the Linux desktop. It's not a cool thing anymore. It was in the mid 2000s. It is not the hot new thing anymore. Companies are moving to the cloud and to like specific niches, like Linux on automotive, Linux on embedded space. That's not the Linux desktop. And I think that if people want to have a functional desktop, we have to have a change in culture in how Linux users, desktop users, interact with the people producing the desktop that they're using. Because right now, I feel like there's this very strong sense of, a consumer and a provider relationship. People come with this mindset, like you're providing me a product, and I have to co-create the product that you're doing, and my feedback is valuable as is because I have an opinion, and that's not useful. And I think we're gonna see less and less companies investing in the Linux desktop, and more the community is gonna have to budget for their desktop.
Mm-hmm.
So if the community wants to have a functioning desktop in 15 years from now, in 10 years from now, perhaps, they're gonna have to stop looking at the Linux desktop developers as a free asset, just somebody who happens to do the job, and start paying the developers that they think are doing a good job, like seriously paying, because I don't think we're gonna have much more funding in the future. But what I'm seeing is the opposite. People coming with this mindset of, like, I use your stuff, even though the license says in the very first line, this software is provided with no warranty and may not fit the purpose. People are coming with this particular mindset of, you wrote the software, I am using your software. Why don't you do what I'm telling you to do? Why don't you write the feature that I want? And just that, like, I'm willing to sponsor you to work on this feature or things like that. I don't know how much of a tangent this got into, but it is a difficult situation. Not everybody stands the peer pressure. Many people, and this is not specific to GNOME. I have to be clear here. Like, GNOME is a famous target, But every single community has this kind of issue.
Mm-hmm.
It is generalized. You can ask, I don't know, XFC people, and I'm sure they will have 15 different stories of abuse to tell you. I know for a fact that many KDE developers, even though the KDE community is perceived as an outsider, as a lovely and adored group of people, I know that by talking to people in the community, they suffer a lot of abuse as well. That's the current situation. How do we change that? I have no idea. In 10 years that I'm contributing to free software, and I have no idea how to change it. Perhaps talking about the problem is a good first step.
Yeah, it's certainly worth mentioning, even though I'm sure just mentioning it's going to get people to be like, why are you saying that? I'm going to be angry at you now.
Yeah.
I think what you're saying is a lot of people see themselves as customers, not just as a user of this open software. They see themselves as a customer even without having done, you know, the first step to being a customer, which is actually some sort of monetary funding. Now, I do want to be clear that when anyone talks about monetary funding, there is the caveat of we are well aware that there are people out there who simply do not have the ability to do that. Like, there are people from developing nations who just do not have any excess income, or people even from, you know, places like America who are living like bill to bill, who simply cannot spare any extra dollar. Like, that's totally understandable, but I've talked to a couple of people about this recently, but there needs to be this shift in the idea that everything that you're getting that is free software is actually free. A lot of people have really I don't want to place the blame entirely on this. People are aware of the difference and just ignore it, but I think part of that does lie on the fact that we use this term free. And I do see people that conflate the two. You're always going to have these, I don't know if you would use the term, maybe you wouldn't want to be as inflammatory as this, but you are going to have these users that do feel like they're entitled to a developer's time, entitled to their software working in a certain way. And I don't know if there's really a way to ultimately deal with that. I do think that there is some onus on these software developers to better put forth a way to fund projects, because a lot of projects are really bad at soliciting funds. Thunderbird is a great example of one that did it really well. When Thunderbird unveiled the new UI, they have this pop-up show up, like, hey, if you like what Thunderbird is doing, give us money. And from my understanding, they 10x their funding when they did that. Which is, they were already, like, Thunderbird was already very well off, don't get me wrong. But, like, they have a lot of extra money now. And a lot of people see this. I didn't hear anyone complain about this, but a lot of people I know will see this as some form of, like, you know, I don't want pop-ups, I don't want advertising on Linux desktop, but I think there is a middle ground here, and I think what Thunderbird did is probably a great point for it, and I would like to see desktops like GNOME, I would like to see projects like OBS, I would like to see, you know, all of these things make it clearer that there is a way to fund these projects, because most people aren't going to go to your project's website and find the donation link, or that's a giant hassle. And even with things like getting involved with development, a lot of projects, and I know this is a lot of work to do, but a lot of projects don't really provide a easy way to get involved with them. It sort of expects that you are already an established developer in this project before you've even started. And I know that doing beginner issues is a lot of extra overhead for the maintainers, and I don't know if there's a better way to do it. But that's also something that I feel needs to be improved upon as well.
Yeah, talking about money in the Linux community is always a tricky thing to do,
Yeah.
right? Personally, I've considered, like, I never put them really in practice. But I considered doing things like, if you want me to fix a particular bug, I can put a contract or like a little box for people to pay with their wallets for whatever they want to be fixed.
Mhm.
Otherwise, you're just hoping that I do my best to fix it. And when it comes to not being paid, I'm gonna follow what makes me happy more than what makes whatever internet random person happy, you know. It is always difficult. It is on that subject, you know. I think FlatHub is cooking up to have paid apps, and I hope that helps. Um, you probably cannot see that, but I have an Elgato light here, a key light. And I wrote a little app to I reverse engineered the network protocol that he used, and wrote a little app called Luminen that I haven't published yet, but it works. You can
Okay.
control these lights. You can connect them to network. And I was thinking, like, when FlatHub publishes, what enables the payment thing, I might want to try this. You know, I have asked Elgato for development samples so I could make their software work for them on the Linux desktop, but they haven't. They haven't sent me anything. Fortunately, people, like, we did a mini fundraising and we got a people paid for this light, so they paid for the light. I got the app done. You can build it yourself. It's free software, of course. I'm not every single line of code that I have done in my entire life is free software. Either I lost it or I published it in a GitLab somewhere. There's no middle ground. But if you want to have the convenience of installing it from an app store, you can, give me $1 for that.
Don't feel
Or
too
something like
bad
that.
about not getting developer samples. When I talked to the developer of OpenRGB, a well-established project that a lot of people know about in the Linux space, even he struggles to get like developer samples of anything. Like all the hardware that he's gotten working in OpenRGB is hardware that either someone has contributed support for or he has directly bought himself. The one thing that he did get a developer sample for was something he had already bought. So he got given another one after he already got one.
On that subject, I can tell you that Logitech is a much better player than most of these companies that I have ever dealt with. They sent. I even had streams or. Oh, you got some Logitech stuff in there.
Got a bunch of Logitech stuff. Big fan.
Yeah, we're working on the Logitech has some lights. I don't know if you can see this thing here.
Yeah.
The little light that you put on top of your monitor, just like one of their cameras. Just plug it in here. They sent me this sample. I'm trying to work kernel module out of this.
I did see you were doing that. Where was it? Somewhere. I don't know, somewhere.
Project kind of stalled, but it was fun and they were pretty responsive, pretty happy. More companies should do things like that.
Oh, I see where it was. It was on your channel. That's where it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, developer stream.
Yeah, it's one of those boring things when you see me cracking my head to get through difficult. I don't understand why people like this, but people seem to enjoy seeing me suffering through development. Just keep doing it. It's fun.
Yeah, I personally don't understand the dev streams myself, but people like what Lena does. See, people seem to like what you're doing, and hey, like if you can, I think I've tried to do some dev streams in the past. I have this trouble of staying focused, so I end up just interacting with the chat more than actually working.
Yeah.
So for me, it's completely unproductive. But if you can make it work yourself, and and people like it, just hey, go ahead and do so.
Yeah. I don't. It's fun because I myself also do not watch development streams of anybody.
You're too busy doing your own.
But apparently people like this. I don't know. People think it's fun. I'm
Maybe,
just gonna do that then.
maybe it's sort of like I I maybe it's the idea that they're also working on something themselves, so it feels like they're not working by themselves. They're working on some homework, they're working on some dev stuff, whatever they're doing. Like, it feels like you're working alongside this person to both try to get something done.
Kind of like a co-creation feeling.
Yeah, yeah.
Companionship.
Yeah,
Through
that
creation.
sounds really sad. It's like, I don't have any friends, so I'm gonna watch this dude's stream programming.
But yeah, people like it.
Mhm.
It's fun and it helps the project because people see that there's a face behind the GitLab avatar. So it's working so far.
Well, a lot of the stuff that you do seems to be stuff that you're just trying to get working for yourself. Like, you were mentioning working on the stuff for your lights. Like, that's part of the reason why I didn't want to buy any, like, fancy controlled lights. Like, my lights, they have knobs on them. I turn the knobs, the lights change color. That's all I need to do. But it's nice that things like you're working on things like that, and then you've got the what do you call it, boatswain, which is also
Bosun,
nice.
but I think the proper way to pronounce it is
Yes.
bosun, as far as I learned.
Oh wait, yes,
it's,
you learned.
Yeah, it's I think it's sailors
I see.
speech. It's a bosun, not boatswain.
Sure, we'll go with that. But for anyone who doesn't know what that is a tool to control the Stream Deck, not Steam Deck. I don't know why Valve called it a Steam Deck when the Stream Deck already existed. Marketing, SEO. I'm sure that was SEO nightmare early on. Stream Deck is a little street. It's basically like a keypad that has little LED screens on it. You just light up, tell you what, like, you like your chat button there, whatever other buttons you want to use. And before things like this existed, like, it was basically like a paperweight on Linux. I think there might have been something that like half
I can
worked.
show you this.
Ooh.
This is one of the. I don't know if you can see from the
Yeah,
camera.
it's,
there we go.
Coming up just fine.
It's literally just buttons.
Mm-hmm.
Just literally that. This is a mini version. I use it for my streams. It's pretty fun.
Mm. And then obviously, a couple of years back, there was the whole getting OBS working on Wayland situation, which, was very nice to have.
I agree.
That honestly,
I had to. Do you know why I did that?
so you could use Wayland and stream.
Exactly. I had to switch back to X11 whenever I wanted to stream, and that was so disgusting to me that I preferred to spend valuable time on making
so
OBS
even back then,
Wayland.
you'd fully swapped over to Wayland. Well, actually, when?
Yeah, I've been using Wayland. I used Wayland. I compiled and used Wayland back when it was just a multiple XR sessions launcher back in 2008. Like, you can even say that depending on how strict you are with the associations, you can say that it's a GNOME project because Christian is the person who ported all of GNOME to Git from CVS, I think, VCS. from SVN, the sub whatever. I don't recall the acronym. But yeah, I've been using it basically since comment number 15.
Jeez.
It was not useful at the
Sure,
beginning.
sure, yeah.
You could just launch different X11 sessions, and that's it.
Mhm.
And it took like about a year to get into this point. But I found it really fantastic, and I kept reading the commit log every day. I joined. I entered the website and saw that. It's pretty fun. Yeah, sorry for interrupting you.
No, no. And now, yeah, nowadays it's actually useful. And not the state it was in then. But yeah, I think I first discovered the work that you do when you did the OBS PipeWire portal Wayland thingy. Because that was one of the reasons why, because I was interested in Wayland. Like I was already thinking of trying out Sway at the time, but I simply could not switch to Wayland at that point because I don't do a dual capture system. I don't use a capture card or anything. I can use OBS, capture my desktop. So for me, that was the first thing where that was like the first complete blocker. Like there are these things that are going to stop certain people, and for me, like I simply could not use Wayland. Now it's more of a matter of WR Roots has this issue where their portal doesn't allow window capture, so that's also a problem.
That's still the case?
It is still the case. Hyperland has a custom portal that does their own custom thing. So for me, my next exploration is going to be when Plasma 6 comes out, because that's, their portal actually does the thing that I need it to do. And GNOME does it as well, so I could use GNOME, but Plasma 6 is where I'm going to be. It would be funny if I actually swapped to GNOME. My comments would be incredible. Oftentimes when I was doing streams on my main channel, I would, if I was doing like a virtual machine, I would intentionally pick GNOME just because I wanted to see the comments I would get. Like when I did my Linux from scratch series, my
Fantastic.
host VM was GNOME for no particular reason.
Nice.
Along with having sounds enabled in the GNOME terminal, just because I want to be extra annoying.
That's how you do it, buddy. That's the purpose of GNOME is to annoy. You're using it right.
I really don't like the fact that you can have a bell in the terminal. I hate that so much.
You can disable that.
You
I
can.
hate the sound too. I always forget. It's one of those things that when I'm not looking at a terminal, it just completely vanishes out of my mind. And then when I'm using it, it happens rarely enough that I don't disable it on spot, but it happens just often enough to piss me off. So I keep in this eternal loop of suffering without doing anything about it. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, it's fine. Just remember to get rid of it, and then it won't be a problem.
I'll forget. 5 seconds after we move on.
So
But yeah, I feel like
go on.
you were mentioning like do things for yourself, and that's basically a lot of what I do. And if you go to my website, the subtitle of myself is "Free software allows me to scratch my own itches, and I do so intensely." I feel like that summarizes the free software culture, or at least what it's supposed to be. If you have a problem, you just go there and so you have all the permissions. You don't have to ask anybody. Just do whatever you want. Somehow that shifted towards you have to do that for me because I don't know how to program and I'm not learning that. So, yeah.
I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing that most people on Linux aren't programmers. Like this it would be nice if there were more of there were like everybody was a programmer, everybody did commit. But it does say a lot about the current state the desktop is in, the fact that there are people who don't have this technical knowledge who can actively use Linux. Like it's a great thing in a sense until it comes back and gets all of the problems we talked about earlier. Yeah.
Yeah, don't take me wrong, Brody.
Mm.
When I was young, I enjoyed coding.
Mm.
I hate coding now. I only do that. I think at this point I'm only still in coding
Mm-hmm.
because the pains that I suffer force me to do so. I wish I could stop. I'm not kidding. There's a lot of musical instruments behind me. You can see from. I wish I could spend my entire days on them, not fixing the goddamn USB portal because I cannot use audio and I don't have a portal. I'm gonna have to do that too, or somebody's gonna have to do that, and I'm gonna have to review that and make that happen. I'm tired of this. I don't like this. But it keeps scratching. I keep itching. It keeps itching, you know.
See, look, you've only wasted your time if you give up. If you never give up, you never wasted your time. You have to think like a gambler, right? If you keep spending money, then if the second you stop spending money, that's when you wasted all your money. Because the next spin, you might win it all back. The next line of code you write,
away from the big blow, right?
the next line of code you write might be the last line, and then everything is fixed.
Oh boy, that's how we do it here, right?
Exactly. Please don't take what I throw at gambling. I actually do that. I do not encourage gambling.
We do not condone gambling, please. Coding is not gambling if we treat it like so.
Oh god. No, I get what you're saying though. Like, whilst how would I say this? When you do something for a long time, you're going like pretty much anything. Eventually the initial joy you had from it is that's going to fade away. Like, you're not always going to be, hey, look, here's this exciting new thing that I learned. Obviously, you can try out new things, but once you start getting involved in like a specific set of projects, there's only so many times it can really excite you. Like, there's only so many times you can look at G-Object and be like, alright, let's go. And it makes sense, but as I said earlier, I am happy that you keep it going because it means that a lot of these things that, you know, like those lights you're talking about, a lot of these things can actually get dealt with at some point because someone feels like they want to spend time out of their day on this specific problem. On this, you know, I can't imagine that many people running Linux happen to have those lights, but you have them and you want them to work, so you're gonna go and make them work.
I'm gonna curse Elgato for not providing the driver for that, and then I'm gonna go to work on that. That's usually the order of events.
One thing,
yeah. I feel like that's the hacker culture, you know?
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
essentially the hacker culture.
One thing I definitely did wanna touch on is, so you're involved also in like the Brazilian side of the GNOME community, and I mentioned earlier I am a boring monolingual person that only knows English, so I have no idea what the FOSS world looks like outside of the English speakers. What sort of, like, how big is Linux in that Brazilian community? How, like, you know, just go on any sort of tangent you want about that.
A lot to talk about. It's a pretty big community in here. Um, look closely, you're gonna find Brazilians everywhere. It is. I think we are like SCPs, you know. Before you know about them, you don't see them. But once you start seeing them, they are everywhere. Every corner, there's one. Free software has been.
You mentioned that, and then I just remember the fact it's not Brazilians, but there's like 3 Filipino people in my Discord. Like, I don't know where they like. I have like 1% Filipino audience. I don't know where they all came from and why they all happen to be in the Discord. But
We are a legion, buddy. You may be one and you didn't even notice. It's a big community. We have like it's quite active.
Mhm.
There's people contributing with code. There's people doing engagement. There's people doing marketing. There's people just talking about it, and it's pretty fun. It's pretty active.
Mhm.
South America and basically all the Latin America sections of the planet are pretty. I feel like we are pretty deep into software. GNOME is a Mexican project, for all that matters. Don't know if you know about that, but it's essentially a Mexican project.
Mhm.
Federico Mena and Miguel de Icaza both created it with a bunch of others in a Mexican university somewhere. I don't remember the name of the city. Yeah, Federico is still around, by the way. It's pretty active in the community. I'm not sure if there's much more to say because if you look at only Brazilians, I think we made a mistake in the past where free software was promoted here in Brazil as gratis, you know, as cost-free software instead of the liberty to hack on this thing.
Mhm.
And then it had a golden moment, and then the wave fell, and then it's raising again much more slowly, but I feel like it's much more like on topic with the values of free software.
Mhm.
Like the people joining are getting the whole concept.
Right.
I can say it like this. There are tons of Latin Americans working on GNOME. I'll say I don't have numbers. We don't
Sure.
have numbers, but I'll say 30% of the community. But the fact that everybody speaks English is hides that away.
Yeah, I guess
think.
that makes sense. Huh.
But there are sub communities. I think French people are also um, massively into free software,
Mhm.
and they have local communities. I participate in the local communities. Problem of Brazil is that's such a massive country. It's hard to get people together.
Mhm.
It's if you take the northernmost point of Brazil,
Mhm.
it is closer to Canada than it is to the southernmost point of Brazil. That's how
Size of
that's how tall this place is. It's difficult to get people together.
Wait, what the hell?
Fact checking that you can.
No,
fact
no.
check that.
I just looked up size of Brazil, and it's not that much smaller than the United States. What the hell? I did not realize it was that big.
Yes. It puts a lot of constraints on how much we can do in terms of like hackfests and like in-person events and whatnot. There's people that I am closer to like Argentinians than to a lot of people here in Brazil.
Mhm.
But it's not as it's not wildly different from other places. Like I'm sure somebody in North America is going to complain about the wide country they have.
I live in
on their hands.
Australia.
Oh boy. Don't you guys have like a massive desert that
Yeah,
is
so
unleavable?
if you look at the population map of Australia, along the coastline, it's all population, and there's like a couple of dots in the middle where there are like Aboriginal communities, where there are like mining towns, but the rest of it is completely empty.
Sounds like a good place for free software to flourish. Empty place, no annoyances.
That's fair.
We can even grow our potatoes together. But yeah, it's pretty active. If you look hard enough, you're gonna see that we're everywhere. People just don't notice.
I guess as you were saying before, the fact that English is sort of the default language on the internet, and if you're gonna get involved with a lot of projects, you kind of have to know English to some extent. Obviously, there is, even if you're doing translation, you still need to be able to speak the language that other people involved in the project know, so you can like communicate that you want to do the translation. But
yeah,
I guess, and a lot of people don't use their like actual names as well, so that also makes it a lot easier to hide it as well. So
yeah, there's that too. But no, I tried to get people together because for a long time, especially when I was starting to contribute to GNOME, I thought I was alone in Brazil. And for like about 2 years, I didn't even realize that there were other people in here were contributing as well. Nowadays, I have like on Fridays, I have a show called there's no good way to translate it. It's like Fridaying with GNOME, something like that. Where we just sit down and talk and get the community together in a virtual fireplace, and I try to mix streams of English content and Portuguese content so that nobody's left out. And I wish I could know more languages. I was planning on doing some Spanish streams. I even thought about doing a Japanese stream, but I don't really know too much Japanese to to do that live.
I know a little.
Too complicated.
I can do an introduction. And I can like order some food and get directions, but don't expect me to do any sort of like actual discussion. That's not gonna happen.
Brody-kun, itsume shimashou. No, it's gonna be complicated doing that live. It's not gonna happen.
Well, it's 2:30 in the morning as well. Yes. Look, if you try to get me to think in anything besides, look, I can barely think in English at this point, but my brain's gonna fall apart. We're actually almost coming up to the 2-hour mark, so unless there's anything you want to touch on, I guess we can start wrapping this up.
Yeah, I think we covered a lot of ground here. Not sure if there's anything more relevant. I complain about a lot of stuff, and I feel a little better now. Thanks for the free therapy.
I just sat here and listened to you.
You're acting like a therapist now.
Look, the whole it's weird to be able to sit down with someone for 2 hours and just talk. Like, how often do you just like a one-on-one conversation with someone for 2 whole hours? Probably not that often.
It's not often, yeah.
And
I'm gonna be pretty tired. My social battery is not the biggest, but I enjoy this. The kind of activity that I have to do a little bit every so often. Otherwise, things derail. But I cannot do much more than that.
Well, I had a lot of fun. There was some interesting philosophical discussions about open source, free software, FOSS, whatever term you feel like you want to use. And I hope that people got something useful out of this. And yeah, I'm sure there's going to be... I will make sure I specifically clip out that segment on... I harassment and stuff, and I'm sure people are gonna have some words to say on that one. But until then, let people direct people somewhere, your blog, anything you want to send them to, any link you want to give them.
I think people can follow me on GitHub. It's Georges Stavracas on GitHub. Because I've been doing a lot of work in that particular space. So whoever follows in there can check what's going on. Been doing some been working on portals recently, but I also do some mockups for OBS Studio.
I just realized we didn't even talk about. We talked about OBS for like a little bit. We talked about most of it.
Yeah.
Yes, that's content for next time.
Been trying to send some mockups to the OBS community so that they can have some guidelines for new interfaces that they want. Apparently, people are enjoying this, so I'll keep doing until, as long as it's useful, I'll keep doing this. And it's pixels on screen. It's much easier to see that than code. So people should feel free to check that out. I have a website. I blog.
Sometimes.
Not very often.
What was the last one?
Feaneron.com.
Oh, the last one was last month. It was extending the month to infinity.
Yes. And I did some pretty artwork with Blender for that blog post. I'm pretty proud of that. Even some animations on Blender. It was difficult. Nice. It was not easy.
Oh wow, that is really cool.
Pretty proud of it.
And then you have the YouTube as well. If anyone wants to pop into the live coding sessions, have a look.
Yeah, if people like seeing other people suffering with coding, you have my YouTube channel. It's also Georges Stavracas YouTube handle, but you can just search for like GNOME. Oh, you can search for the last stream's title, like Popcorn ASMR, and you're gonna find it. Yeah, have multiple links. People should feel free to reach out if they want to talk too. Thanks for having me, Brady. It was super fun.
Yeah, thank you for doing this. This was awesome. And wait, it was Skelly. Yeah, it was Skelly that mentioned you'd be interested in doing this, wasn't it? Yes. I think it was.
Kelly bridged this.
Yes. Thank you, Skelly, for... I've been meaning to get in contact with you for a while. I'm just lazy. There are a lot of people in the FOSS what I want to talk to. So it's good to have a filter on who definitely wants to do it, so that's less people to get in contact with. So if there's nothing else you want to mention, I'll do my outro. Awesome. I've got the gaming channel, Brody on Games. Right now I'm playing through the New Game Plus of Armored Core 6, and I probably hate my life. And I'm playing through Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Distance, which is less hate my life, assuming my internet connection is working, which is a big if right now. We're getting some stuff dealt with, and hopefully I will have more than 6 megabit up when my ISP decides to do their job. The main channel is Brody Robertson. I do Linux videos there 6-ish days a week. Not a clue what'll be out there. Check it out. Maybe there'll be something fun. I don't know. This comes out in a while, like a week or two. There'll be something there. I don't know. If you're listening to the audio version of this, Tech of a T on YouTube this is going terribly. If you're watching the video version of this, you can find the audio on any audio podcast platform. There is an RSS feed. There's iTunes and stuff. Put the RSS feed in your favorite app. I like AntennaPod. Good to go. Give you the final word. What do you want to say? I saw you laughing there the entire time.
Just laughing out of her suffering.
Nothing else you want to say? Just that?
I'm just gonna leave it.
Okay.
I saw Brody suffering and I was happy with that.
See you guys later.